Anoor Shimshad was born in central Turkey. She studied journalism and public relations at the University of Marmara. In 2013, she was awarded a fellowship at Oxford University in journalism, researching Turkish media and how that media was covering the Syrian conflict. Her main subjects are politics and business. She also works as a cultural consultant advising Western companies doing business with Turkey. With Anoor, we shall be talking about Turkish cuisine, about the present situation in Turkey, as well as the major challenges it is facing as a nation as a result of the Syrian war and the confrontation with the Kurds. Well, welcome back to the English Hour on ANN Satellite Television. It's great to have you with us. It's great to be with you. We've got a guest today from Turkey, Anoor Shimshad, who's a journalist and a consultant, and we're going to be talking about, well, three very interesting subjects. We're going to talk about food, which always pleases me, Turkish food, and we're also going to talk about, of course, at a more serious level, the situation in Turkey, how things are in Turkey today. And finally, our third subject will be the Middle East, Turkey, and in relation to the Middle East as a whole. Anoor, thank you so much for being our guest. It's really an honor to have you with us.
Pleasure.
Well, bless your heart.
Pleasure to be here.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to talk about food first because we need some comfort, and food is always comforting. Turkish cuisine is largely a continuation of Ottoman cuisine, with several influences from the ancient Eastern Roman Empire, and specifically from Greece and the Balkans. Turkish cuisine varies across the country, and different regions have different specialities. The country's location along the spice route, the Silk Road, has resulted in Turkish cuisine bursting with colorful and aromatic spices. Among the key ingredients in Turkish cooking are spices, herbs, anchovies, rice, and mint. Lemon is also at the heart of Turkish cuisine. Last but not least, bread is very important in the Turkish cooking tradition, as one can see from the presence of bakery shops on every street corner.
Let's start with a little history of Turkish food.
Okay.
Turks, they come from Asia. They traveled from Asia to Middle Asia to Turkey in the 11th century. They brought all their culture, transported all their culture wherever they lived. They traveled through. It's a bit nomadic culture. And also Turkey is in a very interesting position of the spice and silk route. During Ottoman times, spice merchant could only allowed to bring the best of spice. This is examined by Turkish hierarchies and the standard agencies. They had the best of the spice from Far East.
Wow. Yeah. So what spices are normally used in Turkish food? I mean, the ones...
we use pepper and oregano,
yes.
Turmeric.
Of course, yes.
Yes.
And tell us a bit about, there's so much where do we begin?
Yes.
What's do you have a particular dish that is your favorite Turkish food?
Yes, aubergine dishes and vegetarian dishes I really like. But Turkey as a big country, different parts of Turkey, they have totally different cuisines. For example, in the Black Sea, they are very famous with their maize, corn, tea growth near to Georgian border, Russian border, South Russian border. Also, they are very good at fishing. They are good fishermen.
Yes.
Anchovies we call hamsi.
Right.
And they make even anchovy bread, anchovy cake, anchovy jam and pickles, you name it.
Wow, anchovy jam sounds amazing. Okay, yeah.
Also, the people who lives in Black Sea, they have their own unique culture. They are original Greeks, Pontus. We call them Pontus Turks. They are blue-eyed and hook-nosed, and they have a great sense of humor. They cook and eat food with the music and dance, and they bless the food in a specific way.
Okay.
They are very different.
Right. So they would, and they're close to the Greek culture, you're saying?
The influence from the East Roman Empire. Remember, Turkey is the head of East Roman Empire. We have the greatest museum in Istanbul and Izmir, all the coast.
Yes.
Yes, they are influenced by Romans, whoever they lived in the Black Sea region.
So when we eat dishes like baklava, is that Greek or Turkish or Arab?
We all live together. I think no comment, but the baklava comes from southeastern part of Turkey called Gaziantep.
Okay.
Gaziantep is very famous with their pistachio nuts and delicious kebabs and the herbs. Because being located in the southeast region near to borders, and they have the best of the spice, and they grow the peppers, all kind of herbs themselves.
And Turkey, of course, we always associate Turkish food, I mean we shouldn't particularly, but we think a lot of meat dishes with Turkey. I mean they have these kebabs and
kebabs, especially
many kinds.
yes, southeastern region usually in the south and the eastern part of Turkey, because the weather is very cold. They grow animals. They have great animal husbandry and stocks, lamb and cows, you name it. They cook delicious meat dishes, especially kebabs.
So now teach me something basic. Turkish coffee. If I want to make Turkish coffee,
Yes.
I assume it's with cardamom, isn't it? It's
No, Turkish Arabs, they use cardamom.
okay.
We don't know. Maybe in the very eastern part of Turkey they do. In Antakya. Antakya is in southern part of Turkey. But we don't use the Turkish coffee, or it comes from different part of the world, but the way we make is different. We boil in jezve, the cup called jezve.
Yeah, they're almost triangular shape. I mean, they sloping
with
in.
a handle,
Yeah.
yes, with cold water and some sugar if people want it. And it is important to make with some fluff on the coffee, and it's a great pastime to have a coffee.
So normally you would boil. You bring the coffee to the boil.
To the boil.
In the pot, and then you add cold water again when it boils.
That's all. No, at the beginning you add grinded coffee.
Yeah.
We have special coffee grinders by hand in traditional ones. And we add some water, and if it's preferred, we add some sugar. When it comes to boiling point, we serve.
Okay, so very straightforward.
Straightforward in small espresso cups.
Okay. And so then, and your favorite dish? What's your favorite food dish? Your own personal favorite? You said aubergine.
Yes.
But what is your number one dish?
I like mezes. Mezes are quite big. I don't have a specific one, but it's quite a lot. All the vegetarian starters, like we have Turkish tabbouleh called kısır. We make with the chopped parsley and some bulgur wheat, small amount of bulgur wheat, and all kind of herbs and spices mixed together.
So what you would use lemon juice with that,
Yes, very good point. Lemon is very heart of the Turkish cuisine. We use lots of lemon, especially in the western part of Turkey, Izmir, Aegean region, and the south of part of Turkey, Mersin, Antalya, we grow lemons.
So is there a difference between Turkish tabbouleh and Arab tabbouleh?
Yes, different, slight difference.
I mean, sometimes in the Arab world they put mint in the tabbouleh. Do you do that or no?
We sometimes, but Turkish depends if people wants to put some mint, not necessarily. But we use mint in tzatziki, Turkish cacık made with yogurt. Yogurt is very important food in Turkish cuisine.
Right. Now, what's tzatziki? Remind me.
Tzatziki is yogurt added with some garlic and parsley and some mint.
And this is used to accompany a meal?
As a company of dishes. Okay. Almost in every dishes we use tzatziki, cacık.
Right, but beside, and then you put it in the meal. But no.
Let's say if you have an aubergine dish and you put as a sauce, as a natural sauce, very good. With
does that include tahini? No, tahini. You don't.
Tahini, no. Tahini and we use for different dishes. Tahini used mostly in southern part of Turkey, Turkish cuisine. In Antakya, they have very rich Arabic influenced culture because their food and they always use local ingredients. People, whatever they grow, they cook with their natural ingredients. That's very good.
You were going to tell us about, you were talking about, I kind of interrupted you, you started to talk about your favourite dish.
Oh yes, my favourite dish is called İmam Bayıldı. The dish was, it means the priest, Imam, is fainted. It was so delicious and he's fainted.
Okay.
Or stuffed aubergine dish. The first day we fry the whole aubergine or grill it, then stuff inside with some mincemeat, tomato and pepper and nice herbs.
So you actually take the inside of the aubergine out and then stuff the shell of the aubergine with,
yes, not without even not taking too much, without taking when it's baked. It is more flatter and we feel inside.
Wow, well that sounds very exciting. We're going to now have we ought to have a cookery program on ANN so we could actually demonstrate like they do the most popular things in the world, these cookery programs. We have very good Turkish restaurants in the West, but we have no Turkish cookery program yet. Maybe you'll be a first. Because I notice we have every kind of chef who comes to demonstrate. But Turkish would be interesting.
I like to mention about the Ottoman cuisine. Ottomans, they were very selective. They were very keen on their food. The chefs, they were highly educated. They have to pass many tests to be qualified to cook in the palace. At least they had 60 head chefs and 450 apprentices were helping them. And they were feeding almost 4,000 people every day, palace and the workers. And also janissaries played a great role in Turkish Ottoman cooking history because the kitchen was the meeting point. They would eat and talk about the politics, but it was with a military fashion and discipline. And their chefs has to be highly qualified. There were different ranks in the kitchen.
Well, bless you, Anoor. Thank you for that. Well, we'll all have to go to Turkey now and sample.
Please
we
welcome.
ought to move on to our next subject because
Sure.
we've talked about food. Now we come to the tough stuff, I guess. The politics in Turkey. Let's talk about Turkey itself. Turkey is a multifaceted, multicultural nation. Sadly, it is experiencing terrible tensions which often culminate in violence and bombings targeting civilians. The main issues regard the Kurdish minority and the confrontation with ISIS. The general perception is that Turkey's attacks in Syria focus on the Kurds and the PYD, the Kurdish militia group, rather than on ISIS itself. And paradoxically, the PYD is also fighting ISIS. We should not forget that Turkey, and Istanbul in particular, is part of a route that sees, on the one hand, an influx of foreign fighters willing to join ISIS, and on the other, massive flows of refugees who escape the fighting in search of safer zones. Meanwhile, relationships between Turkey and the European Union are now subject to major diplomatic negotiations concerning the extension of the Schengen Agreement and freedom of movement. Finally, there is the whole issue of human rights. Turkey probably has the highest rate of journalists imprisoned without trial in the world. But journalists are not the only ones suffering from attacks on their freedom. Women and young girls are now wearing the burqa more than they ever did in the past. Is this because of pressure from men? Or is this apparent extremism encouraged by the media and by government? Turkey is, as a nation, it's a multifaceted nation because you have Kurds, you have Anatolian Turks, you have many cultures within in Turkey, but and indeed you have so many actually because, well, heavens, you've got people close to the Syrian border, some of them with Greek influence, some of them with Syrian Arab influence. So you've got Arab culture as well as yes, all within the one country. And now you've got these terrible tensions. I remember in Britain we had a period in our history when we had the Irish problem, and the IRA were regularly bombing, even in central London, and we had some terrible bombings at that time, some of them quite tragic. Turkey is suffering in something of the same way, perhaps you could argue considerably worse violence. Yes. We've seen in recent months some terrible bombings in Istanbul, tragic situation. Things have got slightly worse. They were getting, this is just as an outside observer, and I know very little about the situation, but there was a period of comparative calm for a year or so when there was some negotiation between the government and the PKK or elements of the PKK. Do you feel, I mean, it's difficult to, but what is your opinion? Are we, what is your reaction to these events in Turkey?
Yes.
I mean, do you feel angry, sad, all of that, I imagine, but what is your vision of things?
First of all, Turkey is a very multicultural nation. People from Balkans, from the east and south, they all live together. Greeks and Armenians, they are all one nation.
Yes,
and,
yes, indeed.
And when Istanbul invaded by 1452 by Sultan Mehmed II, his mother was Greek. The Ottomans, they married Greeks and Russian ladies, and they were very tolerant to other religions.
Yes, yes.
Very inclusive. Turkey, in the west we have Balkans, and in the west we have Middle. In the east we have Middle East, and at the moment we have Syrian problem, we have ISIS problem, and we have Kurdish problem. it is a fact, there is a Kurdish problem in Turkey. The Turkish government is working very hard to recognize that Kurdish identity. They have their own television channel, radio channels and newspapers. But the problem at the moment with ISIS is not only Turkey's problem, it's the world's problem. When our next door neighbor, Syria, is in conflict, Turkey is in conflict too. It is very sad what is happening in Turkey in the recent incidents.
Because some observers would say that, I mean, if you look back, I mean, I know that ostensibly Turkey says it's against ISIS, but some say that most of Turkey's attacks are actually on the Kurdish group, the PYD,
Yes.
which is affiliated, obviously. I mean, I'm talking now of in northern Syria,
Yes.
the group that is dominant is what we call the PYD, which goes by many names, but essentially it is a political grouping that is similar in nature to the PKK in Turkey, or
Yes.
we call the PKK. That also gets called the Kurdistan Workers' Party,
Yes.
or whatever. But if I, just for shorthand, I'm going to say the PKK in Turkey and the PYD in Syria. They are, in a sense, similar groups, although they have a separate identity, but they have a similar ideology and similar approach. And people perceive, certainly we perceive, Turkey's attacks in Syria as focusing on the PYD, rather, presumably because they're a sister organization of the PKK, rather than on ISIS. But you would say Turkey is fighting ISIS because...
Turkey is fighting with ISIS. I think this ISIS is a great danger for not only for Turkey, for the world, but at the moment Turkey is fighting with PKK and PYD. There are quite few bomb events happened in Turkey, innocent civilians dying. So Turkey, there are some clashes with PKK and PYD in the southeastern region of Turkey at the moment. This is quite serious and worrying.
Because there's an irony here, isn't it? The PYD is also fighting ISIS. So you have a multifaceted conflict. And there is a perception that Turkey is, obviously all the international volunteers who come to fight with ISIS will come through Turkey, through Istanbul.
Yes.
And whether they're British, whether they're Chechen, or whether they're Libyan, or wherever they've come from, they'll come. Their route is through Istanbul down to join ISIS. To
Yes.
I mean, so this is there's a paradox here when we say Turkey opposes ISIS. I mean, why are these people all able to go through Istanbul?
There are great security arrangements in Turkey, so it is very worrying for the country, for the democratic country. We work very hard to come to this stage. So ISIS, especially, it's a great danger. We have enemy within an enemy, also PKK and PYD and plus ISIS and plus clashing in the southeastern part of Turkey, also Syrian refugees. Turkish security forces and government working very hard, and they try to cooperate with the West in recent negotiations. It will be nice to work together.
It's a huge problem. I mean, you have, to be fair, Turkey has an enormous burden with these literally millions of refugees coming through from Syria.
Yes.
And then going on to Europe, some of them, I mean, but you keep the bulk of them there in
Yes.
Turkey. It's obviously a vast burden.
But for humanitarian reason, Turkey are taking them, and 2.7 million or more every day they are coming. Refugees are living in Turkey. Some of the Turkish town, especially in Kilis, they are educating and accommodating the Syrians, giving them jobs. I think it's remarkable. That I saw in Izmir and Istanbul, big cities, all the Syrians, they try to survive and they set up their own businesses, but Turkey is the route for Europe. That's another.
There is a lot of
worry.
resentment. I mean, I know that, for instance, one of Turkey's many minorities is the Alawite minority, southwestern Turkey.
Yes.
Southwestern
The
Turkey,
Alawite, yes.
the Alawite community next to down there. They feel a great resentment of these refugees. I mean, there's tensions within Turkey,
Yes.
whereby people feel resentment of the Syrian refugees coming through.
Yes. Well, also this is an economical problem. Alawites are not a great supporter of current government.
No.
Current government is their policy is different than what the Alevi believes. So different parts of Turkey, they take it differently for the Syrian refugees. If they are not staying in the camps, there are many social and cultural issues. I saw with my own eyes in Istanbul, very young children and mothers with the newborn babies are begging in the street. That shouldn't be. And the refugees are a big problem to accommodate them and their needs for Turkey.
And Turkey, of course, is doing a deal with the European Union. Tough deal, but it comes with a lot of, I suppose, from a political perspective, I would imagine you view it as positive, but I'm not sure. There is a deal now on the cards whereby all Turkish citizens will be able to travel to Europe without visa restrictions.
Schengen countries without visa. This is the requirement because Turkey will take back all the refused asylum seekers from Greece. It requires great cooperation. In return, they are asking for their citizens of a free movement in Europe. I think politicians are discussing that. We feel it's not too much to ask.
No, it seems reasonable. Although it's, in reality, it's of course one step away from. I mean, it's an interesting question. There's always been this on and off aspiration by Turkey to join the European Union, which comes and then goes away again, and now, in a way, it comes back and re-emerges. At one stage, the European Union was making demands of Turkey in return about human rights issues. That seems to have gone because now we have the migration problem.
Yes.
So we don't want to ask anything from Turkey except for them dealing with the migration issue. Yet, I mean, I'm ranging very broadly in this, but yet there are human rights issues in Turkey. I mean, I'm just thinking particularly of the journalists. The journalists have a hard time, a little bit of a hard time in recent years.
Very hard time. Very sad for my Turkish colleagues. Some of them are in jail for a long time without a trial. And recently, 2 journalists, they are granted by the court, so they could be released, but our president is opposed that.
Your president opposes the release
Of the judiciary system, so they are still in negotiation, but Turkey has the highest rate of the journalists are in prison without a trial for a long time. It is freedom of speech is under threat. Journalists are independent. They are the bridges between ordinary people and the democracy. They are the voice of democracy that should be improved.
This is really the flagship human rights issue. I mean, whatever one says about other issues, if you don't have a... Well, I mean, we live in a world in which how free is the press in many countries of the world. I mean, it's not unique to Turkey that there are many Arab countries where we have freedom of the press issues, but nonetheless, unless we have some element of... We can reach a point where we don't get actually freedom of information at all, where we don't actually know what's going on in a country,
Yes.
because so many journalists
Yes.
are in prison.
Journalists are the cradle of, they are the voice of the society, cradle of information.
Yes.
And there are also media ownership. I like to touch the media ownership in Turkey is under threat. Most of the media owned by big businesses, and this business companies, they're all related to political sources.
Of course they are, yes, yes.
So the problem starts from there. Also recently, a Zaman newspaper is closed down, and there were big reaction for the journalists.
Yeah.
So there are many questions to be answered about the freedom of information.
And Turkish television presumably has the same problems, or is it?
Turkish TV channels are usually, yes, there are many Turkish TV channels. One is, quite few of them are official governments, and for various businesses who are linked with politics.
Having said that, we're talking about all of this, and obviously there are real desperate causes of concern, but nonetheless, Erdogan, the Turkish leader, is probably the most successful, if you talk about just in terms of as a political survivor, as a figure on the Turkish scene, the most successful Turkish politician since Ataturk.
Erdogan has great qualities, and he has a great confidence. Since he came in power, he opened many business obstacles. Turkish companies are doing very well, and especially in the Middle East, in the construction businesses, in Russian states, Turkey is doing quite well. And also within Turkey, there are infrastructures, roads, and communication are remarkable. Government done very good job.
So he is popular. I mean, by and large. Politicians, their popularity waxes and wanes, but what is noticeable is he retains some level of popularity.
Erdogan is very popular. He knows how to address a certain group of people, and he has strong opinion. And he was in power since 2002. It's been a long time.
And yet, at the same time, the thing that when we're talking about human rights issues, one of the things that I've noticed, and it's not unique to Turkey, throughout the Middle East, is the question of women's rights. And when I say women's rights, I just look at the symbolic issue of people wearing headscarves and this kind of thing. I remember, I was in Libya, and I was surprised by the fact that all the girls were wearing headscarves, whereas they hadn't in the past. And I said so, and they said, no, we're still free, and so on. Then I go to Cairo, and I noticed the same thing. And I speak to some of the women, and they say, well, we're intimidated by the men who say cover up, So there's this, and I actually sat in a Cairo cafe and watched, and in the main shopping streets, maybe not so much, but in a quiet street, I watched the people walking by, and I counted 3 women without headscarves for 21 women with. So it's 1 in 7 was Whereas a few years ago, that wouldn't have been the case in Cairo. In Cairo, you would have seen many more women without headscarves. This trend of what would I call it? Of apparent changes, yes, which is a kind of a pushing back of women's freedom, in my view, but maybe it's not in yours.
Yes.
I mean, is throughout the Middle East, and I imagine in Turkey as well.
Yes.
And it bothers me. This it's come after the Arab Spring, but it's everywhere. Women seem to be pushing, as it were, moving back a generation.
That's right. Ataturk, when he made all these changes, when we established Turkey in 1922-23, he made a rule: women cannot cover her head in the government offices, at schools, even as a student, as public servants. They have to take the headscarf off. The recent government, AKP, introduced at universities, which is a good thing in a way. People, they can express their religious beliefs, they can cover their heads, but this is not the Turkey I know of. More and more young girls, they are not only covering, they are wearing burqa. I have never seen in my childhood, in my town, in the middle of Turkey, no one is wearing burqa. I go back to Turkey, I can't believe it, and more people wearing burqa and going to extremist measures. I respect people who has religious beliefs and covers their head, but it sounds like Turkish, the women, they are going to different direction.
And this is, I mean, is this from pressure from the men, or is they're doing this of their own volition? They want to be more fundamentalist and cover themselves in this way?
This is I think it's encouraged by the media and government, and Alevis are different. The Sunnis are Sunni women, they are covering their heads, and Alevi women are always liberal, and they are in opposition. So it's a cultural thing, and
a little disturbing, because it is everywhere.
Very disturbing.
I mean,
this is not moderate Islam. This is going extremist level, and this is against Ataturk's principle.
Yeah. And we get this, like I say, everywhere in the Middle East. It really does bother me, but I mean, perhaps it shouldn't, but it does.
Tolerance is one thing, but going to extremism, we are always against.
I know, thank you. We talked a lot about Turkey. We were going to talk a little bit about the Middle East as a whole, if we may.
Of course.
Bless you. We are in the middle of a Sunni-Shia war in the Middle East. How is this war affecting the relationships Turkey has with neighboring countries? Turkey tries to keep a distance and maintain good relationships, but this is not always possible. With the ongoing migration crisis affecting the whole region, as well as the security and economic ramifications of the war in Syria, Turkey has to confront complex challenges. An effective and sustainable political resolution to the problems facing Turkey's neighbors is urgently needed. This cannot be detached from the necessity of creating a stable situation for the Kurdish minority. Although there is no magic solution, considering Turkey's delicate geostrategic position, Turkey now needs to take on a peacemaking role in the Middle East. So, talking about the broader Middle East, I know.
Sure.
I mean, it seems to me, I'm, again, obviously an outsider, but my perspective is that we have a kind of Sunni-Shiite war going on. That we see...
Invisible war.
Yeah, but, well, it's very visible in a sense, because we have a fault line running through the Middle East, which runs through Lebanon and through Syria and through Iraq.
Yes.
And it even comes down then into Bahrain and so on. But and there is this tension between what I would describe as well, of course, Turkey is predominantly Sunni. Turkey is in a way set to one side from this, but there is this tension led on the one side by Iran, and on the other side by Saudi Arabia, where you have this fault line running through these countries.
Correct.
And then Turkey has traditionally been secular and set apart. It certainly has the language difference, but it's being sucked into this conflict. I mean, historically, Turkey has been a country that has, in recent years anyway, had good relations with everybody, or
Yes.
tried to. It's had good relations with, for example, even although
With Israel.
with Israel, I was going to say, I mean, politically sensitive subject, but you know, I mean, Israeli goods
Yes.
come to Turkey and so on. It's had reasonable relations with Israel. It's had reasonable relations with all the nations, Iran, all of these nations. It's kept a balance. And at this time of Middle East war, it's beginning to take sides now, isn't it? Wouldn't you say it's moving away from its more neutral position as a nation? Or
Yes, there are different times Turkey's position has changed. First of all, Turkey tried to plays always historically plays a mediator role in the Middle
Yes,
East.
yes.
Turkey distanced itself from the religious politics until recent years, so that there are some tensions, of course, but we try to keep a balance at the moment. All the focus on Syria, how to keep up the refugees, and the petrol prices fell down. Therefore, it affects Turkey's businesses in Middle East, also in northern Iraq, where the Kurds are. Turkey was still in good relationship with the Kurds, northern Iraq, with the Barzanis, and they have good meetings. But still, Turkish businesses are flourishing in northern Iraq.
Absolutely.
When it comes to that, Turkey, in considering for their own benefit and business interest in the Middle East, Turkey is a self-sufficient country. They can produce water is a big element in Turkey. Without Turkey's water, Middle East would
Well, absolutely.
drown.
Yes,
And,
I mean, there are complaints now about the Tigris and the Euphrates.
yes,
But
water is more powerful than petrol at the moment. Petrol prices fell down, and shifts and balances has changed in Saudi Arabia, petrol producing countries in Kuwait and Qatar. And yes, there are problems with Alevis and Sunnis. Turkey tried to keep distance. Also, Turkey is very delighted that Iran, all the sanctions are removed with Iran.
Right.
So we try to have a good relationship. On the other hand, with Israel, there are times some clashes happens, and during until the Netanyahu, we were in a very good relationship. Then conflict with Palestine.
Yes, the Gaza conflict.
Gaza conflicts and the Marmara event. Now everything is calming down. They are making it up. In fact, in Turkish and Israeli military, they are in cooperation. That's a good news for the world peace.
So we have the situation that the Middle East is in turmoil. Can Turkey has a history of being a peacemaker, but
Yes.
In the current conflict, there seems to be. I mean, there are two attitudes to what's going on in Syria, which is, for example, I mean, taking Syria as one element of,
Yes.
obviously things are going on in Iraq and so on, but the two attitudes, one is let's try and sort it out and have a peaceful resolution of this that involves some way forward. The other attitude is let's turn our backs on it and let Syria burn and stand to one side. I mean, do you think Turkey still has a heart for helping in Syria and for a resolution?
Yes. Historically, Turkey and Syria had problems with Kurds. Turkey blamed Syria to keeping PKK guerrillas in
Yes.
And then they moved to Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. Lebanon was still under the control of Syria. Also, the government in Syria, they are Alevi. Assad is Alevi,
Yes.
and Turkey predominantly is Sunnis, as you mentioned. But if all the conflicts directly affects Turkey and Turkish border for the security and economy,
Because, I mean, once upon a time, that area of southwest Turkey was in Syria. It got, it became part of Turkey, and the
Hatay, yes,
yes,
part of Hatay. The
yeah.
Syrians they are claiming, and still,
it's still a sore thought point with, mind you, they've got enough problems to deal with, but the Syrian issue. Do you have a hope that Turkey can play a really positive role in resolving it?
Yes. Also, at the moment, we start with the Syrian refugees, and Europe really needs Turkey's cooperation. It is very.
Yes.
Turkey plays a key role. Without Turkey, Western countries are. They don't know what to do. They're unstoppable. With Turkey's cooperation is needed, and they're working on it. I think I trust Turkish policy about the refugees, and they're doing their best, and they're very accommodating. Also, thanks to Lebanon, after Turkey, they have the highest refugees in the Middle East. Also, Jordan, other Arab countries, they distance themselves. They are not taking any of the refugees. These only the three countries, basically Turkey.
Of course.
In recent weeks, security forces in the sea border police control really increased, and they are not letting the boats to sail to Greece. Already started. Turkey wholeheartedly supports European Union's demands, request, I would say. They are willing to cooperate. And
so this is
solve
going to help Europe, but we do need to deal with the Middle Eastern question alongside it. I mean, it will help Europe immensely if the refugee flow is stopped, but then it still leaves this terrible problem in Syria, and to deal with that, there has to be a political resolution, and to deal with it in such a way as deals with the Turkish aspiration for stability with its Kurdish minority. We're going to have to, I mean, there is no way around it. At some point, Turkey has to make some sort of political agreement that involves some sort of conversation with the PYD in northern Syria, or the.
Yes.
I mean, you have to talk to your enemies, don't you, if you want to have a peace settlement? Otherwise, this will go on forever, won't it?
Yes, there is no magic solution to solve all these problems. Turkey's geopolitical position is very strategically, it's vulnerable in a way. We are all surrounded by all these countries. They have their own internal conflicts and affects Turkey as well. It gives a bad smell in the mouth. So Turkey negotiation is good, but with the recent bomb effects and
it's hard to negotiate. Yes,
Turkey needs to calm down, and already they were in negotiations with PKK. They made peace talks. Is broken down. They have to make it up. So I think his future is bright with their very strategic solutions.
Gosh, I hope so. I know that really would be. Well, that's what we need, is a brighter future, and we do need Turkey to take this sort of peacemaking role again. Its historic role of being the peace broker in the Middle East.
If the country Syria is happy, a happy country, and the people will be happy, they don't feel like traveling to Turkey or Europe, then it will be a prosperous country years to come, of course. We all wish the best, and also my heart is broken about ruining all the historical places, and it is a tragedy for human being.
It is.
For humanity is very, very sad, irreplaceable, these artifacts.
Absolutely. Oh, well, bless you, Anoor. Let's hope for that better future for Turkey, for the Middle East, and thank you for sharing those wonderful thoughts with us. I do hope it'll be a better world soon.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for
Pleasure
being
to be
our
here.
guest.
All the
Bless
guests.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, what do you think? The email address is coming up on the screen as we speak. Do email us with your thoughts about today's interview, today's discussion. I mean, happy to hear what recipes you have and what you think of Turkish food issues. But I'd also, more to the point, would like to hear what you think about Turkey as a nation. Is Turkey part of the problem in the Middle East or part of the solution? Is Turkey a peacemaker or a war maker? Is Turkey helping or hindering the fight against Daesh, ISIS? I mean, it is a difficult question, and it shouldn't be a difficult question. The answer should be self-evident, but is it? What do you think? I have to say that I think that Turkey does need to go the extra mile to convince the world that it is truly anti-ISIS. So very well saying you're anti-ISIS, but actions speak louder than words. And up till now, Turkey's main attack has been on in terms of Syria, has been on the PYD, the Kurdish group that is itself fighting ISIS. You can understand that. That's for geopolitical reasons, but nonetheless, all the volunteers that go down to fight with ISIS go down through Turkey, through Istanbul. And Turkey has questions to answer in my view. But what do you think? Is in Turkey part of the solution from your perspective? And the wider Middle East, I mean, is one thing. But Turkey itself has a difficult situation with its own minorities, with its Alawites, with its Kurds, with all of its minority groups, its many minority groups. The Anatolian Turks hold on to power, and of course they are the largest single block of population. And so you could say straightforwardly they deserve to hold power. They are the establishment. But if they do so at the expense of human rights, there are questions the world needs to raise. And we don't anymore. We're very easygoing with regard to these issues, largely because we're more concerned about ISIS. We're more concerned about the war. And it's understandable that we're concerned about the war. But does that mean that we should excuse Turkey, its poor human rights record, particularly with regard to freedom of the press? I mean, we get repression of freedom of the press in many nations, but it's hard to match Turkey's record for the imprisonment of journalists, which really is world-beating. And that has to be questionable, surely. So there are issues here. I'd like to hear your opinion. It was an interesting discussion. I'd be grateful to hear your views. Do email us at ANN Television. Thank you for being our guests today. Thank you.